All right, so today we're diving deep into French Spiritism. Specifically, we're going to be looking at this guy, Léon Chevreuil.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, he's not your typical historical figure.
Yeah.
We're working with an online encyclopedia entry about him. But even just from this, it's clear he led a pretty fascinating life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Painter, philosopher, and a influential spiritist writer, all rolled into one.
Exactly. And the source material we have really gets into all of that. We've got some interesting details to uncover about his life, prizes he won, his connections to some other big names, and how his art reflected his Spiritist beliefs. And speaking of Spiritism, for those unfamiliar, it's basically...
Yeah. Could you give a quick rundown?
Yeah, sure. It's a spiritualist movement that popped up in the mid-19th century, focused on communicating with spirits through mediums.
Right. Gained a pretty big following in France, didn't it?
It did, thanks in large part to Allan Kardec, who kind of codified its principles. But getting back to Chevreuil, let's start with his artistic side. I mean, the guy studied at some pretty prestigious institutions, right?
Oh, yeah, some of the best. University of Poitiers, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris.
Wow, rubbing shoulders with the art world elite.
He was. And get this, his studio was on the famous Rue Boissonade, a real hub for artists back then.
I bet the rent was a killer. But seriously, imagine the creative energy in that place.
Must have been something else.
Right. And what's even more interesting is that he was super open about expressing his Spiritist belief through his art.
Which was pretty bold for the time.
Yeah. I mean, even Air Forestier, who was a big name in the Spiritist movement, was like blown away by Chevreuil's guts, you know? To depict stuff like the soul's survival when everyone else was so skeptical, that's pretty daring.
Definitely. It shows just how deeply he believed in it all. It wasn't just some passing fad for him. He truly believed that the soul lives on after death. And he wasn't afraid to show it either. Actually, a lot of his paintings had spiritualist themes woven right into them.
So we've got this talented artist with a deep commitment to Spiritism. But his involvement didn't stop at painting, did it?
Oh, no, not even close. He was a big deal in the French Spiritist movement. Even became president of the French Spiritist Union.
Wow, so he was right at the center of it all.
He was, and he was a real purist, too. When it came to the principles of Spiritism, he was all about upholding Kardec's original teachings.
A real traditionalist at heart.
Absolutely. He wasn't interested in diluting the core message or mixing it with other spiritual ideas.
Interesting. Especially considering he was tight with some of the biggest names in the movement, like Léon Denis, who had some different ideas.
Yeah. Denis was actually a close friend of his. They both believed in the scientific evidence for Spiritism, but had their own takes on it.
Yeah. Their relationship kind of shows how vibrant the Spiritist movement was back then. All these different thinkers bouncing ideas off each other.
Exactly. And think about Maison de Spirit. It was like the hangout spot for Spiritists back then.
Must have been some fascinating conversations happening there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. People from all walks of life exploring the philosophy and the science behind Spiritism.
Makes you wonder what Chevreuil would think about today's world. In 1932, he even said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that once science accepts the psychic element, it'll change how humanity thinks.
Wow, that's pretty forward-thinking.
Yeah. He was convinced that scientific progress would lead to a greater understanding of spiritual stuff. And he wasn't just talking about it. He was actively trying to connect science and Spiritism through his writing, too.
Which brings us to his most famous book, On ne meurt pas.
Which translates
Does
to
not die.
a catchy title. It came out in 1916 and made quite a splash, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. It really stirred things up.
What was it about this book that caused such a fuss? Was it just the title?
Well, the title got people's attention for sure, but it was the content that really made it stand out.
How so?
Well, he took scientific experiments from back then and used them to argue for the survival of the soul. Even talked about experiments with mediums where they measured weight changes during spirit communication. Like, there is a link between the physical and spiritual realms.
So he was taking on the materialistic worldview head on. And he was using science to do it.
Exactly. No wonder got recognition from the Academy of Sciences in Paris a few years later.
That's impressive. But On ne meurt pas wasn't his only book, was it? He also wrote Le Spiritisme dans l'Église.
Oh, yeah. That one's all about the relationship between Catholicism and Spiritism, which was, let's just say, complicated.
So even within the world of spiritual belief, there were disagreements.
Big time. Both believe in the soul, but their ideas about what happens after death are totally different.
It just goes to show that the search for spiritual understanding isn't always straightforward.
Not at all. And Chevreuil didn't shy away from those tough questions. He was a deep thinker, always trying to understand the nuances of what he believed. He even wrote a book called Le Spiritisme Incompris, Spiritism Misunderstood, which was all about the dangers of getting Spiritism wrong.
Which is a title that still resonates today.
It does, doesn't it? Shows that he was grappling with issues that are still relevant almost a century later.
It's incredible. He was an artist, a spiritist leader, an author, all while navigating the complexities of the time. It's a lot to take in. What stands out to you most about his journey so far?
I think it's his commitment to intellectual honesty. He didn't just blindly accept the teachings of Spiritism. He wanted to understand them deeply, explore them, and even test them against the scientific knowledge of his day. You don't see that every day. It makes his work so much more compelling.
A true seeker, always pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely.
Which makes me wonder, how would he react to modern science, neuroscience, quantum physics? Would he see those as validating his ideas or something else entirely?
That's a great question.
It is, isn't it? And it's one we'll definitely explore as we continue our deep dive into the world of Léon Chevreuil.
Looking forward to it.
Can you imagine him walking into a neuroscience lab today? Or like sitting in on a lecture about quantum entanglement?
I know, right?
It's wild to think about. I mean, he was already using scientific experiments from the late 1800s and early 1900s to back up his ideas about the soul.
He was ahead of his time, that's for sure.
Totally. And speaking of ahead of his time, remember that quote about the psychic element and how it could change humanity? What do you think he meant by that?
Well, he was talking about this part of human consciousness, something beyond just the material world. The psychic element was like a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, you know? It's what lets us connect with spirits, have intuition, even maybe shape reality with our thoughts.
So he was basically talking about the power of the mind.
Yeah, pretty much. And even though his ideas sounded kinda out there back then, modern science is starting to catch up.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, there's this whole field now called parapsychology. They study things like telepathy and precognition. And there's even new interest in the role of consciousness in quantum mechanics, like that whole observer effect thing.
Wait, remind me about the observer effect. It's that thing where, like, just observing something can change it, right?
Right. It's one of those crazy things about quantum physics. When you observe a particle, it's like you force it to choose a state. It collapses the wave function or something.
Whoa. So our minds could actually be affecting the universe.
Maybe. We still don't know that much about consciousness, but it's clear Chevreuil was onto something with that whole psychic element idea.
Definitely. So he was ahead of his time, blending science with his spiritual beliefs. But let's talk about his art for a minute. You mentioned earlier how he put spiritualist themes right into his paintings. What was his style like?
Well, he was really influenced by the symbolist movement.
Symbolism. Remind me about that.
So those artists were all about exploring the subconscious mind, dreams, the hidden meanings behind things. They were like the art world's version of Freud, basically.
I like that. The art world's Freud. So how did that connect to Chevreuil's Spiritism?
Symbolism was the perfect way for him to express his beliefs. He could depict the unseen world, the soul's journey, all that. Think like flowing lines, dreamlike landscapes, that sort of thing.
I could see it. Like he was trying to show people a different way of seeing reality.
Exactly. He wasn't just painting pretty pictures. They were metaphors for his spiritual understanding.
So he was pushing boundaries, both in terms of art and subject matter. How did people react to his work?
It was mixed. Some critics thought it was too out there, even heretical. Others loved it, thought it was beautiful, emotional, profound.
So he was both celebrated and condemned, just like Spiritism itself. But his art is still around today. So why should we care about this French Spiritist painter from over a century ago?
Well, his story teaches us some important things. First, it shows that science, art, and spirituality can all work together. They don't have to be separate.
Right, like we can look at things from different angles, use different ways of understanding the world.
Exactly. And Chevreuil's story also shows us to be brave in our own pursuits, explore ideas even if they're unpopular, express ourselves authentically, even if we face criticism.
Be true to ourselves, basically.
Yes. And his work also reminds us of the big questions humans have always asked. Who are we? What happens after we die? Is there more out there than what we can see?
And Chevreuil, with his art, his science, his spirituality, he gives us a unique way to think about those questions.
It's a reminder that the search for meaning is a journey, and sometimes that journey takes us down some pretty unexpected paths.
Speaking of unexpected paths, We should talk more about his relationship with the Catholic Church. He even wrote that book, Le Spiritism dans l'Église, about it.
Yeah, Spiritism and the church, that was a whole other debate.
I know. They both believe in the soul, but that's about it, right?
Pretty much. The church was pretty suspicious of Spiritism, thought it was occultism, even condemned it.
That's harsh. But what were the main sticking points? I mean, what did they disagree on so strongly?
Well, one big one was reincarnation. Spiritism says the soul can be reborn multiple times, and the church says absolutely not.
Reincarnation. That's a deal breaker for a lot of people.
It was a big one. But it wasn't just about what happens after death. They also disagreed on talking to spirits.
Oh, yeah. The church isn't a fan of that, is it?
Nope. They think it's dangerous, that it could open you up to bad influences. They're like, better safe than sorry.
Well, Spiritists think it's a core part of their belief system. They think spirits can guide us, comfort us, even prove that there's life after death.
It's like a clash between being cautious and being curious, between tradition and new ideas.
Definitely. It must have caused some heated arguments.
Oh, for sure. And Chevreuil wasn't afraid to jump right into those arguments. In Le Spiritisme dans l'Église, he even tries to show how Spiritism could actually help the church, not hurt it.
That's a bold move. How did he do that?
Well, he pointed to figures like saints and mystics. He said they were basically mediums talking to the spiritual realm, channeling messages.
So he was saying Spiritism was always part of Catholicism, even if they didn't admit it.
Yeah, pretty much. It's doubtful it changed the church's mind, but it does show how these two belief systems are connected, even if they're different.
It reminds us that even with faith and spirituality, things aren't always black and white. There are those gray areas, and that's where the interesting stuff happens.
Exactly. And Chevreuil was all about exploring those gray areas. He didn't shy away from tough questions.
He was trying to find common ground, build bridges between these different worlds.
That's a great way to put it. And that's something we could all use a bit more of these days.
I agree. So we've talked about his art, his science, his relationship with the church. But what was he like as a person?
Well, people who knew him said he was kind, generous, and had this unshakable belief in humanity.
So he was a good guy?
He seems to have been. His friend, Paul Baudier, another spiritist, summed it up pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Baudier said some really nice things about him in that encyclopedia entry, didn't he?
He did. Called him a man of immense knowledge and profound goodness. Said he lived his beliefs with conviction and inspired others.
He even compared him to some of the biggest names in Spiritism, like Leon Denis and Gabriel Deland. High praise indeed.
It really shows the kind of impact he had on people. He wasn't just smart, he was a leader. Someone people looked up to for spiritual guidance.
He sounds like someone I'd love to just chat with, learn from.
Me too. And to wrap things up, I think a quote from Chevreuil himself is fitting. He once wrote, "Spiritism is not a belief, it's a science of the soul."
That's so powerful. It really sums up his whole approach, doesn't it?
It does. He wanted people to come to Spiritism with an open mind, a critical eye, and be ready to let go of their old ideas.
And to see how everything is connected, the material and the spiritual.
Exactly. Now, thinking about all that, what do you think about the legacy he left behind? How did his work affect Spiritism, and how are his ideas viewed today? It really is something, isn't it? Even after all this time, people are still talking about him, still finding inspiration in his work.
It is. So what do you think? What parts of his legacy have really stood the test of time?
Well, I think it's got to be his focus on connecting science and spirituality.
Right. He never saw them as being at odds with each other.
Exactly. He was like, hey, science can help us understand the spiritual realm. And he thought that as science progressed, we'd learn more about the soul, the afterlife, all of that.
So he wasn't trying to replace science or anything?
No, not at all. He just wanted us to take a more well-rounded approach, Use all the tools we have, scientific and spiritual, to figure out what it all means.
Makes sense. And it sounds like that really resonated with people.
It did. Both people in the Spiritist movement and those outside of it. I think he helped make the conversation about Spiritism more grounded, more focused on evidence.
So he helped Spiritism adapt to the times.
Definitely. But how about today? What do people think about his ideas now, both inside and outside of Spiritism?
That's a good question.
Well, Spiritists still see him as a really important figure, a pioneer almost.
Right. He helped legitimize the whole movement.
Exactly. And people still study his writings, debate them, and his focus on science. Well, that's influenced modern research on things like mediumship and consciousness.
So his ideas are still making an impact.
They are. Outside of Spiritism, it's maybe less direct, but still important.
How so?
Well, he was a part of this bigger conversation about consciousness, life after death, the whole science versus spirituality thing. And his art, people are still fascinated by it. It raises all sorts of questions about the unseen world, the possibility of connections beyond what we can physically see.
It's incredible how one person's work can have such a lasting effect.
It really is. And I think his legacy reminds us that the search for meaning never really ends. We should always be open to new ideas, question what we think we know, and see how everything is connected.
Beautifully put. And that's what the deep dive is all about, right? Exploring those connections, asking the tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Léon Chevreuil, I want to leave you with this. He believed that art could bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen. What do you think? How can art help us explore those big questions about life, death, and reality? Think about it. And as always, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
And keep listening.